Planning Commission, and we'll go ahead and open for approval of the minutes from the meetings of December 14th, 2017 and January 11th, 2018.
I move we approve the minutes of both of those.
Second.
Aye.
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 Okay. We have a conditional use permit for a major home occupation B for a handyman at 171 West, 350 South for Vaughn Hickson.
As a quick introduction, and then Mr. Hickson is here as well if there are additional questions. The property you can see near the east end of the road. Mr. Hickson is hoping to get a conditional use permit to start a home business as a handyman here on the property. He's got generally small power tools and smaller equipment that he can keep within his vehicle, and he does have a trailer also that he uses for the business. There's a pad or every bed on the side of the home where he can park that. Everything else seems to be in order, and based on the way that the business operates in my conversation with him, staff doesn't have a recommendation of additional conditions. I felt that it could be approved subject to the applicable ordinance.
Straightforward.
Seems.
Trust staff on this one.
Yep. And we need more handymen and women around.
Yeah.
Because they get used, and we needed some recently.
Good. Okay.
I'll make a motion that we grant a conditional use permit for major home occupation B handyman for Vaughn Hickson at 171 West, 350 South.
Second.
Aye.
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 Aye. And Lyle, are people automatically listed on the business listings when they get these permits, or?
Anne Marie would be best to answer that.
If they don't want to be on the website, they can tell me. But most people opt.
And do they?
I do a new business list every month too that I send out.
Great. And so, do they automatically go on unless they say no?
On that one, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. That's one I think, if people know to look there, then seriously, they would get a lot of business, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, we have another conditional use permit for a major home occupation for a group exercise class at 552 East, 1475 South for Janice Calloway.
Okay. Ms. Calloway informed me ahead of time that she would not know what's been proposed and if there are any questions. Worst case, if we're not able to cover it and you're not comfortable, she did say she hopefully could come at a future meeting if we had some reason to table it, but I think we can go over this one. She's got some background in exercise science, I think a bachelor's degree and something of that nature listed in the staff report. And because of that, she's got neighbors that have expressed interest in learning from her some routines and exercises and doing classes. And so she's anticipating doing about 4 or 5 people at a time over at her home early evening for about half an hour once a day, 5:30 to 6 o'clock as stated in the staff report. And because it does require that there be a limit placed on either the number of vehicles coming for the purpose of the business or the number of students. In this case, it sounds like being close neighbors, some of them may walk or come through other means, but it was staff's recommendation to limit the vehicles themselves. Based on it being an adult class, I felt like it'd be more effective at stopping it from getting out of hand. And with that, staff recommended a limit of 5 vehicles per class. My conversation with her is she's okay with that restriction. And other than that, staff's recommending approval with that condition, subject to the conditions of the ordinance.
Makes it hard to ask any questions we might have, but it's pretty straightforward.
I think the limit was good, just being familiar with the area.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we grant a conditional use permit for major home occupation B group exercise class for Janice Calloway at 552 East, 1475 South with a limit of no more than 5 vehicles per class.
I'll second.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, we have a conditional use at 1921 West Phillip Street for Mackenzie Page.
Okay, and the applicant is here on this one again, so I'll keep it brief in case there are additional questions. She would be here to help you out with those. We've got another group class here, this one for younger children, generally 6 to 12 students at a time. She's looking at doing classes about 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, for an hour and a half from about 4 to 5:30. And sounds like there's kind of a known element that the kids would often ride their bikes or walk over here, probably be dropped off by parents. Based on that and similar businesses that we've dealt with because of the need to put some sort of limit based on the ordinance, similar to the last one, staff's recommended approval with a limit of 12 students at a time on this one. And with that, I will turn it over to the commission for questions of myself, or if you'd like to address the applicant, I'm sure she'd be happy to speak.
Okay, is Ms. Page here? Do you want to come up? So, have you done this before?
I have, and I currently teach. I've taught for 2 years at Odyssey Elementary. I teach art lessons there as well.
Oh, good. Okay.
Something nice is that since it's a corner lot with Hill being less busy than Phillips, there's some spots on the side there as needed. Seems like sometimes people could walk or ride bikes, but they don't always do it. So I noticed that.
So are your students local? I mean, do you advertise or how do you?
Yeah, so when we started doing it, most of them come just from the neighborhood.
Okay.
So most of them, their parents do tell them to walk because they're just a few houses away. But there's a large area for cars to park, and the lot across the street is horses, so there is no driveway there. So no cars are ever blocking people's driveways or homes as well.
Good.
And I'm just curious, do you tend to have all ages? Like, do teenagers even come?
Yeah, so on Mondays it's 4 to 6, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays are 6 to 9-year-olds, and then Wednesdays I go up to 13. So
kind of young teens.
Yeah, all ages.
That's fun.
Good.
All right, I'll bat 1,000 here. I move that we grant a conditional use permit for major home occupation B group art lessons for Mackenzie Page, 1921 West Phillip Street, with class size limited to no more than 12.
Second.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Good luck.
Okay, we have a public hearing for a request to rezone approximately 0.5 acres of property at approximately from residential agricultural to an R120 for Jeanette and Brett King.
Okay, just by way of introduction to the item before the public hearing is open. The property is currently zoned in RA zoning district. You can see it in yellow there on the map, just on the west side of the new Parkwood Lane Street. So currently it does allow for half-acre lots. They're hoping for a slightly different configuration and therefore requesting the R120 zoning district. You can see the table in your staff report. They're very similar in what the zoning permits, roughly the same slight differences in the minimum lot frontage or rear yard, but ultimately they're just affecting the rest of their property themselves, so not a lot of other neighbors impacted, and it's very compatible with the type of housing and development that's found in the surrounding areas. With that, where it is first, the rezone item, the council's looking tonight to pass along a recommendation to the city council for the R120 zoning district. And that's at your discretion whether or not you think that's appropriate based on the general plan and the specific site and its compatibility with the area. The second item we're looking at 20 zone be found appropriate. Staff's findings that the plat are in good order with the frontage, lot size, access, and so forth, where we would recommend approval of the subdivision plat, both preliminary and final as proposed. So with that, I'll turn it back to the commission for the public hearing, and I'd be happy to take comments as you have them or questions.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. There's no questions for staff. We'll open it up to a public hearing. Should we do both of them then at the same time, or do we need both?
I believe you could do it either way, probably as long as it's known that they're welcome to speak regarding either the subdivision or the public hearing, or excuse me, or the rezone.
We'll ask for two motions, but you can hold the public hearing since the issues are generically the same.
Okay, thank you. No one wants to speak or questions? Talk to us. Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing.
Subdivision plat. I'm not sure exactly what the old lot lines look like and what the new ones. Can you kind of walk me through that?
Yeah, so the property owners have multiple parcels currently. There we go. And so you can see some of the existing property lines, like you're saying, that does show some confusion with it. The proposed one, there's a 100-foot distance here against Parkwood Lane, and then it creates this rectangular shape towards the back. So it's a 20,000 square foot rectangular lot with its frontage here on Parkwood Lane. So these other lines would be clean.
So is it one parcel now that's going to be divided into two, or are there 2 or 3 parcels we're looking at?
If you head back to the other maps, Andy, I think they may possibly more clearly show so they own, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to be probably slightly off, but all of this property up in this corner. There are multiple parcels shown here on the map currently with that.
Okay.
And so this one would be carved out of the other existing properties and left as a buildable lot.
Mostly in that one, but there's actually 2 or 3 or so that are being affected.
Correct.
Okay.
But it's one owner.
Just redrawing the lines, yeah. I don't see anything
Yeah.
controversial.
What's that?
I was going to say controversial, but you
Yeah.
started talking, so
No, I don't.
decided not to say that.
I don't see anything controversial either. But I'm just curious, and I could venture a guess, but can you go to the zoning map with the colors? So, like I said, I can guess, but why is this not LD? Why isn't that proposed? What is it about LD that does not allow them to do what they want to do?
One lot per every half acre. The RA zone would have also been a true half acre lot. That's 21,760 square feet. The R120 lets them go down to 20,000 square feet, so it is slightly smaller. And beyond that, the R120 and LD are identical in what's permitted, frontages, conditional use, and so forth. And so it's perhaps if it had been part of the other development, they would have done it, but where they're developing it on their own and separate, it does give a tiny bit more flexibility, I believe, in the lot size that's permitted because it's a standalone lot in the subdivision.
And this is going for the minimum 20,000, so that's
Correct.
I supposed if I would have looked at the plat, I would have answered my own question. It's probably not a deal breaker in my mind, but it would have been nice to just have it all LD. And the only reason that it just makes way more sense to add that little chunk as an LD, make it exactly a half acre, make it LD. But the only reason I say that is because I could see someone in the future, whether it be a member of the city council or planning commission or an applicant, saying, "Hey, well, you just leapfrogged everything and made that an R120 with nothing else around it that's R120. Why can't you do that in my spot?" You know, you have two carved out, one property as one zone in the future. You know, generally speaking, we want to have contiguous areas of zone on one hand, I guess. On the other hand, we say, look, on the ground, you drive on this street, no one's going to know that that's the R120 and the one next to it's RA and the next one to that one's LD. So that's the only concern or thought I had, but it's not a deal breaker in my mind.
And the argument people make for spot zoning.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the concern. But again, driving along the street,
Yeah, they'll never know.
no one's ever going to know the character of this property.
Yeah.
So,
Could you just point out which other properties they own? Could they?
Yeah, on this map, it's hard to see the green on the green.
So they.
I'm going to
could
say there's
have
roughly
gone
5 acres there. Is that this way as well? So they've got 7 acres of ground. He's correcting me that's in this corner of the street.
So they could get both of them. They could carve out the other one next to them and keep it to the zoning. Kind of leaning towards what you're talking about, though. If we zoning, it's going to open all of that up.
so if my math serves me, somebody do some algebra. 100 or times x equals 1,780. That's how much you would have to add on the back end of this property. But that means we would be saying we would be dictating to them what they have to do with their property. Which,
Then the frontage would change to that. Is the frontage different?
no, I would keep the 100 feet the same, is what I'm saying. Just add the extra square footage to bring on the back.
Yeah, the existing zoning that they're requesting only requires 90 feet of frontage.
Yeah.
They've
I
allotted
see.
they've allotted to exceed that and keep 100 feet as is proposed. And then I believe that they've requested specifically to do this portion of the property as a new zone and not the entire property because, again, speaking for the applicant, so please correct me, but they have barn and probably animals and other things that are more conducive with the RA type district rather than an R1 district on the remaining portions of it. And so they're just looking for a means of carving out the one lot for one home that would be used slightly different from the majority of their holdings.
Curious to hear from the applicant and what their thoughts are about at least my concern.
I was going to do not algebra, but I was going to divide all of that. But is the applicant, would you step forward?
Well, I'm not sure what math you need to do. Isn't it just adding that 1780?
I was going to take their 5 acres and see how many half acres they could.
Yeah, it is really, it's adding 1,780 square feet on the back. I was just saying, how many feet is that? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So do you understand what my comment is?
So
Basically, this is what
you're thinking about. You want to put it to the R1LD is what you're thinking.
Exactly, which means the minimum, which is 1,780 more square feet than you've proposed. Is that right?
No, the R1LD I thought was 12 or 14,000.
No, it's 2 units per acre. If they were to go to a full half acre, excuse me,
Water?
they could stay in the RA zone and not rezone at all.
I see.
There's,
Yeah.
just explain, Brett, why you're
Yeah,
splitting the
it's
lot off.
Basically, my father-in-law passed away a year ago, and so my mother-in-law wants to live by us, so that's why we're breaking it off and letting her build a home there. So.
Okay, so
it's much ground.
Yeah.
I mean,
But you already have 20,000 there, right?
she doesn't want very much ground. I mean, that's the bottom line. I'm going to be taking care of it, so anyway.
Yeah.
There's only
How would it change things, though, if you just did that lot 21,780?
Well, it takes more ground for me. You know, I really don't want to put only the least amount I have to with the home. Is the bottom line.
I mean, okay, let's look at it this way. let's just assume that it was a quote unquote in and of itself. But let's assume that we recommended R120. I think, and I've said this in other contexts, so just speaking for myself personally, each rezone, one, we learned last time, is a legislative decision, and so there's broad discretion for us to make a decision. And each rezone, in my opinion, stands on their own. Each one is different. Nothing necessarily has precedential value or weight for other rezone decisions. Each one has its own factors, own variables. They're all different. And so we could justify this by saying, look, 120. Over here, the circumstances are different because of X, Y, Z, whatever those are. So, again, that was my only comment, and that's not a deal breaker, so I would be fine with
Well, not
the
only
application.
the rear lot part of it goes back to 15, so they do become smaller. You were talking about adding more. We're actually giving up 15 feet in the back.
In the mandatory rear yard size.
Which, and I'm guessing it would be bigger than this, but
Yeah.
And you can see where there was one other kind of spot as it developed, right? Backward L, yeah.
my guess is that more than one lot or dwelling? Three.
There are three
Yeah,
lots
several.
out of that subdivision.
Yeah. It's a little more palatable with three, but
We did that, didn't we? That's recent, isn't that?
I think it predates me, but it's probably pretty recent. So that's about 4 years.
So, yeah, I think I'm all right with the rezone.
And we are doing a recommendation. We're
Yeah.
not the legislative body, so.
right.
And I agree that we have to look at each one
Yeah.
on its own merit.
But then we also have to look overall.
That's true. And as to that question, I believe that this is appropriate because, again, it's not changing the character of the neighborhood. It's not as if, we've had light industrial on the mind recently, relatively. This is not a completely incompatible use to this subdivision or this area.
Yeah, I mean, another way to look at it is looking at that backward L of R120, how much does that bother us, or how much does that offend the, kind of general plan and our mission? If it doesn't bother you, then this, I think, is totally acceptable.
Right. I will make a motion if we're ready.
Yep.
Okay. So I make a motion that we recommend a rezone of approximately half an acre of property at 2130 South Parkwood Lane, approximately, from RA to R120.
Second that.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect.
And then should we do on the
Another
plat?
motion, yeah.
So then I would make a similar recommendation to approve preliminary and final plat for the same property.
I'll second it. To me? Aye.
Okay.
Work.
Thank you.
Good luck.
It's really pretty over there, too. I've always noticed it.
It's a great farm.
It's a great place.
Okay. Looks like we're going to interpret Kaysville's ordinances pertaining to the breezeway and front yard setbacks.
Okay, so this one's come up, a recent building permit came into our office, and just unique enough architecture that it raised a question on staff's looking over the plans. We figured we'd bring it to the Planning Commission for some assistance. Probably makes sense to do, at least in my opinion, but per the exact letter, there were some questions on how that fit in with our ordinances. So looking through your staff report, you can see the home that's brought in has the main portion of the home and then a roof that connects it to a separate garage, creating an auto court. The architect, I believe, is here tonight who can talk more specifically about how that works. But you can see what it would look like from the street. And then when you look at the site plan, we've got two of them in your packet. You can see that Essentially, the concern that's come to staff, the 30-foot front yard required in the zone is drawn here, and at least what would typically be the front yard requirement as far as distance. However, the ordinance says that no detached accessory structures should be placed in front of the, probably ought to go to the exact language, but the main dwelling. And so this being the main dwelling, this portion of the proposed home sits slightly in front of that by a couple of feet. And so our question for the Planning Commission, based on reading through our ordinances, is we're looking to be able to say whether or not that's part of the main building. So in the next set of plans, you can see the roof structure and how that comes into play with it. It's all typically when we look at the definitions that were given to the Planning Commission, people can connect detached or anyway different portions of their home together by a breezeway. Breezeway has a 3-foot by 10-foot dimension maximum. My understanding is kind of historically that was put into place so that, for example, somebody wouldn't build a house behind their house, stick a 2x4 between them and say they're connected, it's one home. So the city put in at the time some minimum dimensions saying, you can't be so far away that you've got two buildings so far away on the property, and it's got to be substantial enough that it's not just a 2x4 connecting them, but it becomes a unique situation because it's bigger than the maximum requirement in that. And for that reason, it may make sense to permit, but finding how it sits in with the definitions, we've come to you for some guidance in making that determination. I believe we've got the whole crew here, the builder, the property owner, and the architect available for any questions you may have of them, and we'd be happy to take them ourselves as staff. Just looking for determination from the Planning Commission if it could be interpreted that if it's one building, then they're good to go and continue their construction. Or start their construction.
I have a couple thoughts.
Okay.
We had something similar to this, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I remember it because it was someone I knew. And so I do remember that contiguous roof line being something. And so the other thing is that I have seen a home just like this because my sister has a similar design. And she calls it a porte cochere. Is that right? It's kind of a fancy cochere. I'm surprised that I even remember that because it was way too fancy for me, but she designed it. And so I see it fitting according to the definitions that we have. That's just my first thought.
So let me try to muddle through my thoughts. And it really comes down to looking at the definitions in 17-2, I think. And first I'll start, if you can go back to the site plan. I actually, so this line is the setback.
Correct.
That is not the way you read the definitions. That line or this dimension here is not the front yard. An open space extending the full width of the lot, measured between the front lot line here and the closest main building. So the question is, what is the front line of the closest main building?
Yes.
Is it here or here? Because this one is closer. Okay, so with that, now let me go. So the question is, what's the front of the main building? Here or here? That's my question, I should say.
That is exactly the question.
Okay, no greater than 10 feet. By the way, I think that's just sort of an arbitrary dimension. But I don't think there was any rhyme or reason behind it, is my guess. And no greater than 10 feet in any horizontal dimension is open on two sides and joins doorways of two separate buildings, which are considered as one main building in any residential zone. So yes, this garage is separate in the sense that there's a space between them. It is considered one main building still. It is not an accessory structure. Mm-hmm. And so if we say, okay, then this is not a detached building, a detached accessory building or detached garage or anything, it's still all one main building, then that means this is the front of the main building, and nothing is in front of this, and it's not in the front yard. The accessory building, which it's not, is not in the front yard, which was the concern, and therefore it's total, and it's still way behind the setback, and so.
It does, but isn't that assuming that the breezeway connects them, and therefore the garage is part of the main building? I mean, isn't that the assumption we're
That's what it says,
struggling with?
But yeah.
I mean, you're making an assumption that the breezeway is a breezeway and therefore connects the two buildings, and therefore the garage is part of the main building. I think the question we have is that definition of breezeway sufficient, or does that definition of breezeway exclude this from being a breezeway? Because if this is not a breezeway, then that is a separate building.
Okay, and that's a great point. So if this is not a breezeway, what is it?
Well, I mean, the breezeway is what's defined in the code, right?
And you're saying, so, okay, and so.
No, I'm is not, hey, this is the main building and so therefore it's okay. The question is this a main building? And the way you answer that is saying, is that a breezeway? Because otherwise, it's two buildings connected by.
And so if I'm just trying to, and so if you're saying then, because it's not 3 feet by 10 feet, it's greater than that, then it's not a breezeway.
Well, yeah, I mean, read the definition of breezeway, but that's what it seems like to me. I think it's I'm not sure why the distinction is, why it's that important, but you can imagine an extreme case, right? That they have a huge barn and they put it way 50-foot roof, right? Just to get around this detail, right? Bad facts make.
And right. I see that, and I think that this is distinguishable from that, because if you look at the front elevation, this is not 50 feet away from,
right. So what's the I mean, one way to argue this or to solve this is to say we need to change the definition of breezeway, and we need to make it, instead of 10 feet, 15 feet or whatever feet you think is magically okay, and then
or not even set such strict parameters on it. Make it more subjective. This is very right. Does it or doesn't it?
Right, but it's what's here, right?
The commission, something that we've looked at on similar types of construction in the past is if it's not a breezeway, is it a porte cochere? Is it a carport? Is it some other feature that perhaps isn't defined so specifically that also makes it part of the main building? I think we were hesitant to just outright say it was a carport based on its size, even though it is very large. But again, architecture, there's probably any number of features that may be existing that aren't called out within our ordinances that still would qualify it as a main building, and could be a one way of looking at it.
Okay,
I like that better.
Well, and I don't know if
a breezeway, and that's a problem. And I say if you don't call it a breezeway, it's not a problem.
Okay, great. It's not a breezeway. It's a garage that is part of the main building.
Yeah, and my personal thoughts on it is this does not offend my sense of aesthetics
right.
or planning or anything. I think it's great. The problem we have is we have this language that gets in our way. So then this is my solution. Let's not call it a breezeway, because it's not a breezeway by the code. So a private garage is defined like this: a detached accessory building. I don't want to talk about that, or a portion of a main building used or intended to be used for the storage of vehicles of persons occupied. Look at it from the street. It looks as though it is just part of the main building. It just so happens to be that there's a pathway through for a car to drive through.
Yeah. That's why my sister's house is.
So it's a garage that's
got a separation.
Not detached. If it were detached, there would be no attachment to the building. But it is attached to the building, and it is aesthetically incorporated into the design of the building. And in fact, there's a gate that's further strengthening the attachment. So I think it's a garage that's not a detached garage, and therefore it's part of the main building, and the front of it this main building. Does that work?
It does, but I think if you stood back and looked at it, it's more manipulation, because the reality is now all you need to do is not call it a breezeway, and you can do whatever you want.
No.
How long can this not breezeway thing be before it violates your sense of what the intent of the legislation was?
I would know it when I see it.
Okay. I've heard that argument before. My question is, so this may be a stupid question. Why don't you keep the roof contiguous from the non-breezeway back to the whatever that is at the back here?
What do you want to speak? You're talking a potential design change. So.
Look at the roof plan.
Yeah, I'm looking at the roof plan, and I'm not saying I read this correctly, but the non-breezeway part here is a limited amount of width, and then it's open, and then it goes back to what? What's that back part?
The back part is the large attached garage.
And then what's this? And then there's this.
And then the center part that's not covered is the auto court, where they can maneuver their vehicles to get in or out of the garage.
So this will be all concrete, yeah?
All concrete.
Right.
Yes.
And this thing up front that's the potentially offending part of the building, that's a garage as well?
It's a single car garage, correct?
Okay.
That they will.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very beautiful. We just have two attorneys who are looking at every word.
Trying to get it right is the way I put it.
But I think I said the same thing they said in the beginning.
Sure.
And to maybe, Matt, to address your concern is that someone, and it may not be probable, but it's possible that someone would come in and try to do something not acceptable, something that we would not like based on what we decide now. Is that your concern?
Yeah, I mean, I'd put it way is defined and limited to a certain amount of length for a reason, right? Otherwise, it's not in there.
Yep.
And the legislators who created this decided that 10 feet was the right width.
Mm-hmm.
So I could argue that what we're doing here is changing the legislation because we think 10 feet is not the right number, but it's probably some other number like 15 or 20 or 30. So if you're a strict constructionist, I think this is not the right way to go. If you want to say, well, this is the right result, then I think this is great. I'm fine.
But I think you can still be a strict constructionist and wholly abandon the breezeway, and you apply it elsewhere strictly under a garage, which is part of the main building.
The reason why we use a breezeway is to connect two buildings and make them one building, the main building, right? So if you're not going to use that, then you're going to just say, I can connect any two buildings and make it the main building. And I think that's, we're not talking about saving children's lives here, so I don't want to die on my sword, but I think, we're being crafty by saying, oh, well, we'll just not call it a breezeway, then we can do it longer, and we'll just decide at some other point how long too long is. That being said, I think this looks great. I'm okay with voting for it or having you all vote for it and me against it. I hope this gets in. I like the building. I think it looks good. I just think the law is poorly
And perhaps
bothering us.
You know how slow we are at getting some ordinances back to you that we promise, but perhaps that could be direction to avoid those future situations is correction to the ordinance.
Yeah.
There's a number of things that I would almost scrap the entirety of the definition of a breezeway, but
yeah, we'll get to that.
Well, just the concept is what's too long of a connection to make something to keep it in the main building category.
And this question is not before us, but if it were, I would be saying I don't like to set parameters because this is a perfect example of how the parameters do a detriment to something that actually looks nice and works.
We'll just change it to say whatever Josh thinks.
That is not what I'm saying.
Pretty.
Make it a workable subjective standard.
How wide is it?
It's 14'8".
So we're talking about 4 foot 8 inches.
But 10 would be very small.
Yeah.
10 doesn't allow
Something
for
that
cars to
large.
really navigate.
Right.
Well, 10's the width of a parking stall.
Flexible
Right.
navigation, yeah.
Right.
So that'll be.
And I think a breezeway, this is more like a porte cochere, because a breezeway implies you're walking under it for, or driving under it. You're like the length of it. You're not driving under the width of it. A porte cochere would be so I would call this a porte cochere connecting a garage on the main building. How about that?
Well, that's why that's why I would prefer it to be covered. Then it seems like it's all part of the same. That to me makes it more part of the main building. But
Oh, it's not covered with the roof.
just that. See that?
That in-between place.
Section.
The roof comes here. What are you talking? You're talking over here?
Well, the space in between it, right?
There's no roof there.
There's a roof
There's
there.
a roof there.
No,
yeah.
but the large have a roof.
Yeah,
Then it feels more like all part of one main building.
But if I were the homeowner, I would definitely not want a roof over that area.
What if they put like a planter or something that would prohibit a car from driving through, like a 4-foot planter in brick with that?
And where? would
Cars driving through is not part of the problem.
yeah.
It's just
How long? I mean, I think the question
It's
is
just
how long can
the
you
way it's
extend
wording.
the roof to attach to another building and still call it the main building? That's what's going on. That's the issue.
and a previous commission determined 10 feet was
Yeah.
that number.
Legislation, right? The legislature.
Right, but that was the determination
Yeah.
that was made. And so that's the,
And the key is that's the legislators that are doing it.
But since we are updating and we know that that's a design that is used, the porte cochere design, and that you would want a larger space between so that it's not so tight to purposefully drive through, we can
and if
certainly
this
look at
was a
updating.
3-foot wide breezeway, 10 feet would seem a lot longer than it does being, 9 feet as I recall?
9.
Oh, the width of it's 9.
Width is
So
9.
you're saying
9
it
by
doesn't look.
14 or something?
It looks a
Yeah,
little.
it's pretty wide and almost
Yeah.
15 feet.
So you're saying it makes it look more like the main building.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want to do is determine that this is all one building and not two separate buildings
Yeah.
Yeah.
connected by
How
a
would it look
breezeway.
if it was just half that? If it was 4.5 feet, it would look more.
Breezeway-ish.
Yeah.
So I think at least my thought of the outcome is what I would like to do is not call this a breezeway, and I understand the reason why it gets tricky to do that, but this is not a breezeway. This is just a connection for the main building. It's a garage connected to the main building, not a detached garage. It does not violate any portion of the ordinance. Oh, and by the way, we should clarify what a breezeway is later on.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I put more precisely, we need to clarify what kinds of structures can connect to otherwise detached buildings to make it a main building. Because that's the problem, right?
The problem is the setback.
Well, right.
If we don't call it a main building, then he's got to move the garage back 2.5 feet.
And I'm just looking at it from the plot.
So we're trying to find ways to call it a main building so that it doesn't have to be moved back.
And looking at it, you can't move it back. You can't move the whole thing back because of the rear. Is it a rear setback?
Of the attached garage is right at the rear setback, yes.
Yeah.
And we were trying to maintain 30 feet between the front doors of
Yeah,
each
I
of the
saw
two
that on the-
garages
I can't
for
pull it.
maneuvering vehicles, yes.
I can't pull in front of me, but I saw that on the drawing. So, are we doing a motion here? When we interpret it, we tell you how we're going to rule on it?
I think we need a consensus of some variety where there's, sounds like,
A motion would be fine to interpret the ordinance as you determine.
Josh?
Okay. Give it a shot here. Allow the plan as proposed because the offending portion is actually a portion of a main building that's connecting a garage that is not a detached garage. And therefore, it is all one main building, and the front plane of this garage is, in effect, the line of the determining line of the front yard, and so there is no portion of the main building, or there is no accessory structure.
building.
There's no accessory structure that's in the front yard. Yeah, it's part of the main building.
Listening.
Anne Marie will make you sound really good in the minutes.
She does.
Okay.
I can vouch for
Perfect.
that. Good job. I will second that.
Aye.
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 Nay. I'm glad you got it. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
glad this is going in.
This is one of those that's difficult because this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The letter of the law just trips us up a little bit.
Right.
But we've been updating things that need to be updated, which
Yes.
now we know another area to update.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay,
you.
thank you. Okay, call to the public. We were
I
all
was thinking maybe you
excited.
came to call.
Well, you're still part of the public. I mean, let's hear it.
And tell us how amazing we are, making your meetings easier.
And is that why no one ever shows up?
I think so. Okay, we'll do the reports.
Okay, appreciate you guys going through these. This is what we do all day long within our office of fight back and forth,
Yeah.
how to fit things in those ordinances. It's a fun deal. Regular planning commission meeting scheduled. I believe it's the 22nd is the next one. And we do have a couple more ordinance items back on, and we'll see what else comes onto the agenda. Apart from that, I don't have any other correspondence or calendar. Share that there's another training video. If you're interested in doing it tonight, it's another 10 minutes, or we can pull it on to another evening's agenda as well. The part 3 and final part of Brent Bateman's
Found the one last time was
both full
very,
hats. So
was good.
Funny and good, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I do have one thing, just a little update on, I think you all would be interested in this, the focus for the business support meetings that we, after helping the businesses hear about the road utility fee options, that was January. In February, we just really opened up the meeting to support what some of the businesses right across here had already started last year. The summer and into the fall was a downtown business stroll on the third Thursday of each month. And, you know, it started pretty small, but it was just their own little thing. We didn't have a lot of city awareness helping them out, you know. But all the people who've weighed in and been aware of this in the city on the staff wanted to support that effort of the businesses. And so that's what and there was a great turnout, and there were some great ideas and some great volunteering from some of the businesses to really make this more this year, including moving it to the second Thursday so that, seeing as we get less audience for planning commission, that would maybe be better than the third Thursday when sometimes the city council becomes popular. So moving it to the second Thursday, and there's a business that does websites. He's going to do a website for the downtown stroll at Pro Bono, and the Utah State with their third to collaborate and kind of cross support. So they are involved, and there's another business owner who has been a professional event planner. He's helping out. So there were just some really great things that we hope that this will be something bigger, helping all of the businesses, not only here, but just raising awareness for all business in Kaysville. Something I did not used to know, but I know now from our wonderful finance director. Believe it or not, the small retail sales that Kaysville generates, city, from that than there is from our portion of property tax. So, in fact, by more than $1 million sales tax revenue from just the small business community that we do have. So it's really important that we support this business community, that we are a place where people want to continue to come for businesses that fit in Kaysville. And of course, when people voluntarily spend their money and generate that tax, that's the best of all worlds. That's economic development. And and we need that revenue. So anyway, for that, and spread the word about the downtown strolls. The months that it will run are June through October, and those dates have been set, and it should be something that can grow. So we're excited about that.
Thank you for reporting that. Okay.
For the motion to adjourn.
Oh, we're going to watch this.
Oh, sorry.
Take it easy.
All right.
The public can call the planning commission meeting. Yes, and they want to speak. Wait. Hello again. Welcome to What Hat Do You Wear, Part 3. I am Brent Bateman, the state property rights ombudsman. If you're watching this video and you have not watched Part 1, the difference between legislative, administrative, and quasi-judicial decisions, and watched Part 2, the Planning Commission, then stop this video right now. Go back and watch those first. That's important. No, go ahead. I'll wait. Brief recap.
Uh-oh.
You see?
Oh, short. I like those.
He's
So
an
have
attorney.
you watched part one?
I think he's an
and two?
attorney too, isn't he? Oh, ombudsman.
Yeah. Yeah, just so you can skip ahead a little bit.
Then stop this video right now. Go back and watch those first. That's important. No, go ahead. I'll wait. Okay, fine. Brief recap. In Part 1, we talked about how local government officials make either legislative, a legislative decision makes law, an administrative decision applies the law, and a quasi-judicial decision interprets the law. In Part 2, we talked about the role of the Planning Commission and their important legislative role. To study, draft, and recommend to the Council a general plan and amendments to ordinances, as well as their occasional administrative role to hear and decide land use applications. Today, in Part 3, we will really bring these concepts home. What do they mean, and what role does the public play? And in an upcoming video that you can show to the public at the beginning of a public hearing, I will address the public directly. I want to let the public know how they can best contribute to the land use decision-making process. So watch out for that. And again, let's set our quasi-judicial hat aside. It deserves its own video. This discussion will focus primarily on the legislative and administrative decision-making processes. The power of local government to make and enforce land use laws is not inherent. It is specifically delegated to them by the state. Land use power is derived from the police power. The local government has great discretion to decide what it wants its town or county to be, and accordingly what zoning and land use laws it will adopt. Basically, our system gives a local government some power to tell people what they can or cannot do on their land in the interest of the public good. But in order to do that, the council must formally pass ordinances. This process of passing ordinances is the legislative process. Now, the public's role in the legislative process is huge and absolutely critical. The local legislative body, the city council or county commission are elected by the public. They should listen to the public, tell them what they want their town or county to be. Yep. That means that when a legislative decision is being made, there comes a point where the public has a right to speak. All right, we as the Planning Commission of the beautiful town of Pleasant Vernal, Utah will now consider whether we should amend our zoning ordinance to allow pet crematorium in our very brightest and best smelling residential zone. We will now open the floor to public comment.
I am in favor. I am sick and tired of my neighbor throwing her dead pets into my yard.
crematorium 2 blocks down the road.
If this wasn't something we all wanted, why did they name the road Roasted Cat Street? And for the record, it was just the one cat that one time. Thank you.
When are you yahoos going to fix the potholes over on Whiteout Street? If you approve this, children will die. Thank you. This is all great input. Thank you to our wonderful and helpful public.
He makes a pretty compelling argument.
As a planning commissioner or city council person, as long as you are wearing the legislative hat, you can and should consider all of this input when making the decision whether to amend the ordinance. The state law requires that the planning commission hold at least one public hearing where the public is allowed to speak when considering a legislative decision. Your local codes may require more public hearings than that, such as a city council meeting, and that's fine. The public must be allowed hearing. And if you are making a legislative decision, you must hold a public hearing at least once. Listen to them. Consider what they have to say. And then make your zone change or other legislative decision. What about when we are making an administrative decision? What's the public's role then? All right, last week we amended our zoning code to allow pet crematoriums in the SSH1 zone. This week, we have an application from Mr. Howard Muckluster, who would like to open a pet crematorium in the zone. This is an administrative decision.
There's a lot of people here from the public, and I think they want pet crematoriums here.
State law does not require a public hearing for an administrative decision. Only a public meeting.
But does our local ordinance require a public hearing?
Yes, it does.
Okay, let's open it up to the public.
If you approve this, traffic will increase on that street. My kids play on that street. Children will die.
If you approve this, burnt pet hair will be released into the atmosphere. My children breathe that.
If you approve this, pets are going to start mysteriously disappearing. My children love those pets. Children will die.
When are you dinglings gonna fix the pothole? I don't have evidence. I prefer public clamor. Please make your decision based on public clamor. Public clamor. You can't. That's a decision. We need evidence. Facts. Relevant, probative, objective facts that prove or disprove whether or not this application complies with our ordinance. Clamor, meaning the opinions, fears, and unproven conclusions of the public. That was all we were considering when we were making a legislative decision. That was when we were deciding whether or not to allow pet crematoriums in the area. But we had already decided that now. And now someone has applied. And our job is to decide whether or not their application complies with our ordinance. Because if it does, our answer to them is yes. Administrative decisions, evidence. So, what do we do with all those folks that show up at planning commission meeting, pitchforks and torches in hand, clamoring about an administrative decision? Well, there are some options. Option one. We can decide not to hold public hearings for administrative actions, or at least not to hold public hearings on every administrative action. Option two, if we do hold public hearings on administrative actions, we can make sure we understand the difference between public clamor and evidence. And option three, we can try to educate the public regarding their role on how to best fulfill it. Let them know that clamor is unhelpful at the administrative decision. Evidence, not opinions, is what is needed. The public's role here is important. In fact, officials, we want to know what the public thinks and what they want. Their opinions are useful when we are making a legislative decision. That during the administrative process, we are applying, not making a law. Although this seems most often when the public shows up and has the most to say, this is the time to distinguish between evidence and public clamor. Managing this process and avoiding making administrative decisions based on public clamor is one of the best ways to make the correct.
That's it. Think of the children. Appreciate your work.
I have a question. What administrative decisions do we have that require a public hearing in city ordinance, if any?
I believe our ordinance, if anything, may speak to the subdivisions for a public hearing, but I'm not certain that that's on ordinance. It might just be a way of tradition and practice that we hold it that way.
I think, if I recall it correctly, the state statute requires a public hearing to be held for, we just hold one public hearing with the Planning Commission. Because I think there's some discretion on a preliminary plat. I'm not sure how much.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Generally speaking, our ordinances follow the minimum requirements of state law and generally do not impose additional requirements, right?
Typically, that's the case. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other comments?
I got a request for a survey from this group. Did anyone else get that? It was super quick, and that's all I had was quick, and I went in, and the very first question I didn't know the answer, which was, have you been updating all of your stuff, was the question that I guess, is Planning Commission, and how long is it taking you? 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6, and so anyway, I just thought, well, yes, we're updating it, and it's going to stretch out for a while, but I shut down at that point and didn't do the survey.
Yeah, I think that was specifically from the league,
Yeah.
looking for feedback on cities if they've responded to last year's legislation and specific updates. But yeah, it's an ongoing process, and some go quicker than others. But
yeah, okay, let them know that, I guess.
When we say them, you mean the Utah Property Ombudsman?
No,
the League of Cities and Towns.
League of Cities and Towns. Yeah, well, are they the ones that produce this?
No, this was the Ombudsman.
This was Ombudsman.
Yeah.
Okay. They call it the luau, though, and the league helps with the luau.
I think they may sponsor the program a little bit.
Yeah, something like that. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Motion, you were going to do 10 minutes ago.
I move that we stay and talk some more. No, I move we adjourn.
Get better.
Thanks. I don't know. I just...